Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 6th chapter in the book of Matthew. The range we already covered was the first 18 verses. We're going to take it from 19 all the way to 34, all the way home. And the 6th chapter, the range we're going to be covering today, takes place a little past the midway point of the 6th chapter and a little past the midway point of the Sermon on the Mount, which comprises 3 chapters in the book of Matthew. It is the single longest recorded sermon in either testament. A lot of interesting stuff here, but we're just going to concentrate on the 6th chapter today, just the precursor. In the first 18 verses, he warns and speaks against and warns about hypocrisy, the tainting of spiritual disciplines and spiritual practices which are not immune to sin. When these acts of devotions become about ourselves, then they are meaningless and futile, is essentially what he's saying. Beware of doing your kind deeds before men in order to be seen by them. Otherwise you have no reward from your Father in the heavens. To be seen by them and be doing it before them for the express purpose of being seen is to, not do a good deed, seldom if ever for its own sake, but always and only to be seen. So these people see your kind deeds. Now the kind deeds, this translation is a general term, but it's more specifically almsgiving, the practice of pitching coins. And, a lot of self-righteous Jews in the days had purposely loud coins that they could clank to advertise their piety in public, but the only reward, they forfeited their reward. So the reward they seek is made plain in the next verse. They have the reward that they seek to be praised by men. They have the reward in the publicity they seek, but it goes no further than that. It does not account for anything in the heavenly standing, because the act of devotions is all, if it's about yourself, then you're using religion for selfish purposes, and you're debasing it and reducing it to something that's irreligious. So that your kind deed shall be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret shall himself reward you openly. This is the paradox of the equation. It's if you do it in private, if you give money in private without advertising the fact, without being a showboat about it, without your motivation to be seen by men, and just to, a lot of super wealthy people do donate a lot of money to charity, but they always make sure that it's recorded and advertised, and at least there's some record and recollection. To their credit, some of them don't. But if your motivation to give is to be seen as generous, and rather than to be generous for its own sake, then there's no reward in that. The reward which is beyond yourself is when you do it in secret, do it in private. Seek no reward, seek no recognition, and you will be rewarded in an obvious, transparent way, having done so. The next discipline he addresses is the practice of prayer, in some sense the most elementary spiritual discipline, and it is immune to the same hypocrisy, the showboating, the egotism, the one-upsmanship, the ones who pray in public, and they have the same reward that the public almsgiver do these public prayers, these showboats, these braggadocios. But he tells them, retreat to your closet, go to your room, and pray in private. The definition of integrity is what we do when no one is looking. So the hypocrites, they don't pray, they don't give alms when no one else is looking, and they probably do all sorts of vile things when no one else is looking, because their guard is down. But use not vain repetitions in prayer. This is the way of the Gentiles. They had the baser foundation of revelation. It also says something in the 8th verse, which connects to the 32nd verse in the range we're going to cover today. Therefore do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. The them is the Gentiles who do these vain repetitions to their imaginary deities, these items of no metaphysical substance save the wood and gold and earthen material they are on. But our Heavenly Father is an omniscient being. He knows us perfectly. He knows us intimately. He knows us thoroughly. He knows us better than we know it ourselves. He knows the thoughts, the needs, our wants and our needs and our desires before we can even articulate them. That is how total his knowledge is of us. So why pray at all then? And the answer is, do you become closer to God through the act of prayer. It is a commandment to pray. We are not, just because he knows everything we need doesn't mean he's going to give it to us if we're not praying to him. And the Lord's Prayer is I'm not going to recite it verbatim. If you need me to say it, then you're... I don't want to shy you away from here, but it's my qualm with it, as expressed in the previous lesson, is that it has been subjected to, ironically, more vain repetitions than any other prayer, and it is warned against it 2 verses before in the 7th verse, then verses 9 through 13. We do want to read the 10th one. Let your kingdom come, let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Remember, the emphasis in the range we're going to be covering today is living with kingdom priorities. So what is the kingdom? And the kingdom is connected to its king. The king was in their midst, and the kingdom that the Jews, the Old Testament Jews, they expected a Messiah to bring a kingdom, and he's claiming something that, they have this conception of it. But the kingdom that he brings is not of the earth. His kingdom is truth, and we have to. The kingdom is both the present. It is now. It is beholdable. It is when he dwells in your hearts, and when 2 or 3 in the midst, he is there. The king, where the king goes, there is the kingdom with him, and we have to be praying for it and working for it. And to pray for it without working to advance it is to indict ourselves of the grossest hypocrisy imaginable. Blasphemous, borderline in my book. Verses outside of the Lord's Prayer. Now, in the Lord's Prayer, he says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. But then after the concluding amen of the 13th verse, he elaborates somewhat on forgiveness, which is a spiritual discipline and sacrifice, certainly. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your Father of the heavens shall also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither shall your Father forgive your trespasses. We are to forgive regardless of the worthiness of the recipient, anyone who crosses us in any way. So, praying is closely connected to forgiveness, because the bridges of forgiveness cannot be mended without people praying over it. But forgiveness, now, if you are unforgiving, then why should the great heavenly judge, whose justice is perfect, be forgiving to you? So we do reap what we sow in the afterlife. What we sow in this life is what we are investing in. So forgiveness, divine forgiveness, is far too precious a commodity to squander on the unforgiving. Then the next discipline he addresses is that of fasting. Fasting is also closely connected to prayer. I wouldn't recommend fasting without prayer. That is something definitionally different. That is just starving yourself. The precise point of the practice of fasting, which is to deprive yourself of physical food, your body, for extended durations of time. And if you do it without praying, you're just starving yourself. The presence of the physical difficulties accelerate the necessity of the spiritual appetite to be fulfilled. And when you fast, do not be sad-faced like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so that they appear to be fasting to men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward. Same outlook, same outcome as the public almsgiver, the public prayer, and the public faster. The Pharisees paraded around Mondays and Thursdays. They probably advertised their groaning stomachs and just exaggerated the part in the street, played the part, just let everyone know they were fasting. So what should have been a selfless deed of self-sacrifice was tainted by the sin of selfishness. So any act of devotion that we do motivated by self or to be seen of others or publicity, if we seek the publicity, we have the reward that we seek. And he speaks of rewards and treasures in the range we're going to cover. We're going to begin now, lesson itself. Verse 19, 6th chapter of Matthew. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in the heavens, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. The treasures of the earth are the material gain, and this is closely connected to mammon, which he addresses in the 24th verse. But just the materialism. Now, he is not an extremist towards he neither glorifies poverty nor magnifies affluence anywhere in the Gospels. So, but he cautions against investing to prioritizing the treasures of the earth above your impermeable and indestructible treasures of heaven. The moths and the rust which corrupt and destroy are testament that it is designed to decay and perish, just like everything else in motion in the universe. It has a definite lifespan, and it's not impermanent. One day, the treasures, the robes of ancient kings, where are they now? They are consumed by moths. And look at the Rust Belt. Rust is all over. It was once a thriving portion of much of the Western world. They're Rust Belts now. It's been exacerbated somewhat since the digital revolution. But the thing about any earthly item or treasure is that they belong to no one indefinitely. Someone can steal it. Someone can barter it away. You can give it away. Thieves can break in. They can steal the treasures. If you have, the bank, there's no, someone can steal your money, and there are ways so the anxiety which comes with the increased accumulation is what he warns against more explicitly as the chapter unfolds and develops. What he says in the 20th verse is the opposite. He forms a way by contrast. He's talking about treasures on a whole nother level, treasures of the heaven, treasures that are connected to the eternal and emanate therefrom. And these are impermeable and indestructible and impervious to decay, degeneration, or death. So no thief can break in, and no physical matter can corrode or corrupt the treasures which lay in the heaven. He's speaking about our salvation. That is something that is going to shine as brightly 100,000 billion million years from now as it does the day we first walk into it. For where your treasure is, there your heart shall be also. The treasure are there because the heart is oriented that way, is my way of thinking of that. But if you have these two options, the treasures of earth, and there is nothing wrong with material gain and honest gotten wealth. There's nothing unrighteous about it if it doesn't become your God. So if you have possessions, the danger and the temptation is to be possessed by them. But if you give thanks to God, remain grateful, remain devoted, remain humble, remain obedient, then the possessions will not possess you. But the danger and temptation of accumulation is that it's never enough. To quote the former CEO of GM, said how much he was making record sales, and he said how much would be enough, and he said just a little more. But that was just him, and his treasures were his heart and his treasures were in the wrong place. We have to look above and beyond ourselves to live beyond the lives that we now have, because when we speak of earthly treasures, they too will die. Someone's gonna get all our stuff when they die, and it's gonna be frittered away, no matter what. So you can't take anything with you. We didn't bring anything when we came in. We can't take anything with us. 6th chapter of 1 Timothy is another good topic on the wealth and the dangers thereof. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, all your body shall be enlightened. The eye is metaphorically the brain, so the eye gravitates around what it is attracted to naturally. So if your eyes are attracted to the treasures of the fleeting, fragile, passing earth, and not on heaven, then your lamp is going to be defunct. You are going to be walking in darkness and think that it is light, we soon read. But if your eye is evil, all your body shall be darkened. If then the light that is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So to be so spiritually blind and confused to think that good is evil and evil is good, this is a consequence of the of a reprobate, fallen, lost, doomed sinner who's so askew and so far away on the broad and narrow path to destruction that their eyes are continually oriented towards evil, so much so that their whole entire outlook on life is darkened, and there's no light and no hope and no destination. But if you think darkness is light, then all that is true will become a lie. All lies will become accepted as true. All that is good will become evil. All that is evil will become good. All that is sacred will become that which is polluted, et al., etc. No one is able to serve two masters, for either he shall hate the one and love the other, or else he shall cling to the one and despise the other. You are not able to serve Elohim and wealth. The more familiar translation of the final word is mammon, which is not, as far as I know, a deity or an idol. It was an Aramaic term for materialism or the ethos or spirit that drove it. But even before that, he speaks of the impossibility of having divided loyalty. If you are a servant, you belong to a master and him alone. No servant can serve two masters simultaneously with the same love, adoration, affection, and loyalty. So there's no such thing as neutrality in the Christian life. There's also no such thing as a divided loyalties. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. We have to have the singular focus and attention. We have to cast our eyes, our spiritual eyes, on Yahweh, who is the light. Because money is a cruel master and a deceptive one. It ensnares, it enslaves, it controls, and it disposes those who are consumed by their lust for it, and none of them are immortal. So the wealth goes somewhere else, and eventually it fades. And the gold of thousands of years ago is rust today, and that's just the way it is. But you cannot simultaneously serve two masters, because that is a conflict of interest in the servant-master relationship. Especially in the ancient world, there was no double part-time jobs. When you were a servant, you belonged to a master, and you did whatever he told you to do wherever he was, and you you had to dig, but you're going to cling to one and despise the other. Eventually the servant has to come to a moment of decision. Which master am I going to serve? The fleeting, fragile, vanishing treasures of the earth, or do I want to invest my treasures in heaven and in eternity? Everyone has to decide, but no man can serve two masters. Because of this I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you shall eat and drink, and about your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than the food, and the body more than the clothing? The hedonist and the materialist would argue otherwise, but this is self-evident in its obvious implicit inference that but what the other thing that he does is he equates worry with sin. Anxiety and dread about the future is in fact an act of faithlessness, and it is condemned and indicted and exposed as counterproductive to kingdom priorities. If you're seeking the treasures of the earth, you will be consumed by worry, because when you don't have it, you'll be worried by your lack thereof, and when you get it, if you get it, then you will be worried about someone else getting it and losing it and getting it. Guarding it, getting and guarding wealth can be a snare and can enslave. It enslaves much of the world. Look at the birds of the heavens, for they neither sow nor reap, nor gather into storehouses, yet your Father of the heaven feeds them. Are you not worth more than they? His logic is to argue from the lesser to the greater. The birds of the heaven, they are beautiful, they make pleasant sounds, and they are pretty cool to look at, and they're pretty harmless creatures. But in the eyes of, we are the crown glory of his creation, human kind, because we are endowed with the image. But nevertheless, Yahweh does not neglect his creatures, his creation, the lesser life forms. He does provide for them. And because they don't have to do, if they are birds, they don't have to, their eating process is not, does not necessitate the process of reaping and sowing. They have other ways of getting it, and it's because the Father provides it for them. So every food, every item that we can eat is his gift to us, and we shouldn't treat it trivially. We shouldn't take it lightly. We should thank him for it. And just a reminder that you are worth more than any other animal in the animal kingdom who Yahweh provides for, even though he regards them not as esteemed as you are. And which of you, by worrying, is able to add 1 day to his lifespan? Worrying and anxiety, if anything, lessens lifespan. It has deleterious psychological, physiological, potentially physiological defects of a life consumed by anxiety. It does produce, to be consumed and controlled by anxiety is you just have an overwhelming dread of the future. So the Greek word, which translates as worry and alternately anxiety, and depending on the translation, is to be pulled apart. So he who worries is pulled apart in all different directions. They are thinking about one thing and they just have these wandering thoughts, but they are in service to the wrong master. So why do you worry about clothing? Note well the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And I say to you that even Solomon in all his esteem was not dressed like one of these. There is a magnificent beauty and unduplicatable beauty in God's creation, his nature. He is by far the single greatest artist. Humans can't even come close to competing what he has crafted in the galaxies and just everywhere else. So our ability to create and produce art is solely an act of grace that was given to us by our Creator. But the lilies, they are pleasant to look at. They are aesthetically pleasing. They're certainly great paintings. One, Monet and the post-impressionists, they had plenty of outstanding paintings, Monet especially, of lilies. They are something to behold in the sight. But even Solomon, the richest, wealthiest, greatest, most prestigious, most prominent king in the history of Israel, he was the final king of the United Monarchy. His reign witnessed what constituted a golden age of Israel, but it fractured. The United Monarchy fractured not long after his life, and it was because of his own sin. But he would have had the best robes. He was the world's wealthiest man. His wealth was estimated to be somewhere in the trillions of dollars by Reliable. It's not an exact science, but most economists and historians believe that that's how much he was worth. But no clothing or human creation can ever compete with just just a tree or a flower or anything else. That's just something more remarkable in that, because how does it grow there? And just the whole thing of that adds whole nother layers. But if Elohim so clothes the grass of the field, which exists today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, how much more you, you of little faith? So the grass is even less glorious, certainly, than lilies. They're just mundane. It's uniform and not so. There's no distinct or really outstanding looking grass. There's really no such thing, but it is designed to have a short shelf life in the land. In the cycles of nature. It's there for a season, then it gets blown away, it dies, it withers, and then it is no more, and then it grows back, but it's not quite the same life form. So, and in the agricultural analogy, the grass was customarily, when this farmer had, gathered all the grass, he would throw it into the fire, the furnace, and how much, if you are, that is, can be likened as analogous to hellbound, but that's we don't want to take it that direction. You of little faith, faith is the key which unlocks all the access to the abundance of divine blessings, and we don't want to take our eyes off that or get distracted from the heavenly treasures which await us by the fleeting, fragile, impermanent, destructible items of the earth. Do not worry then, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? These are common everyday concerns we all do, whether we admit it or not. We do think about what we eat and what we drink, and certainly what we wear. And we have to eat, we have to drink, and we have to wear clothes. But we shouldn't worry over them. It's necessary for us to think. We don't want to deprive ourselves of food or just have a horrible, imbalanced diet. And we don't want to deprive ourselves of drink. We won't make it too far. what should we hear? We should dress respectable and presentable in public, but not make it about what you're wearing. So if this worries you, if you stay up at night losing sleep over it, then your priorities are not aligned with the kingdom. So, for all these the Gentiles seek for, and your Father of the heavens knows that you need all these. The same Gentiles who prayed in vain repetition because they did not know they were estranged, they were aliens and strangers from the Heavenly Father, who knew them by name in spite of their lack of knowledge of Him. But the Gentile ethos was implicitly one of mammon, the pursuit of material and gain and rapacious riches, and they were just the world in which Israel had to inhabit. Money does make the world go around. The Jews were somewhat above that and beyond, but they were not immune to covetousness. Certainly the Pharisees and the Sadducees. But seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these shall be added to you. By that logic, if we look only to the kingdom of heaven, seek it first, don't worry about everything else, and once you find that, everything else will be added to you. So if you become a Christian, you're not going to be homeless, you're not going to be destitute, you're not going to be deserted, you're not going to not have a roof over your head or food in your 3 square meals a day at least. But seek first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness. The kingdom is closely connected to his righteousness. The kingdom is connected to his perfect rule, his total absolute justice, and his sovereign dominion. And he can provide. He is Yahweh Yireh, our provider, who created everything and gives it to us. Everything in creation is his gift to us, and he also gives us the gifts that we need from it. So if we seek him, we will be satisfied. We will not be starving physically, but spiritually satisfied. We will have everything we need to survive in the physical, carnal, temporal world. Verse 34, final verse of this chapter and lesson. Do not then worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow shall have its own worries. Each day has enough evil of itself. So we have to be future-oriented. This is necessary and proper. We are investing in eternity. We have to think about the future, have 5-year plans, 10-year plans, everything else. But don't worry about the future. Don't stay at night, because you have to live in the present at the end of the day and the beginning and everywhere in between. All we have is the present. The future is not something we can experience. The past is something we can never recover. So all we have, whatever time of the day it is the present. And sufficient is the day for its own troubles. So you got enough on you got a plate full, and adding the burden with these unnecessary anxiety-inducing, consuming thoughts of just the worst possible scenarios, what's going to happen to me, where, that is an act of faithlessness, and the way to do that is to take your eyes, unchain them from the earth, and look them to heaven. So where our eye is where our hearts will be, and where our hearts be, we will be. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.